On Sunday mornings over the past several months, we've been looking at some great chapters in the Bible. We've looked at Philippians chapter 4, we've looked at Romans chapter 12, and now we've been going through John chapter 1. And John chapter 1 is an amazing chapter. We learned so much about Jesus in this gospel. Jesus had many brief encounters with a variety of people during his ministry. We think about some of the just chance, one-time encounters that Jesus had with people, but he also had other close relationships that he developed over time. His relationship with Lazarus and Mary and Martha. These people were especially close to Jesus. It was a relationship that developed over a longer period of time versus these one-time encounters. We know that he certainly was close with the 12 apostles. It was these 12 men that he spent more time with than anybody else. And out of the 12, we know that there was an inner circle of 3, Peter, James, and John. And I believe we could identify John perhaps as his best friend. When we read the Gospel of John, as we are going through John chapter 1, we are able to see Jesus from the vantage point of an inspired best friend. Think about who your best friend is. And if you had the opportunity to tell other people about him or her, it would probably be easy. If I were to think back to the best friends I've had through life, and I were to describe these individuals to you, it would be easy to do. If I were to describe Shannon to you, that would be an easy assignment for me. So as we read the Gospel of John, we are looking at the apostles' account, but we are also looking at a best friend's account. So let's recap what this best friend of Jesus has shared with us this far. He has described Jesus in heaven for us. Before Jesus left heaven and came down here to earth, these are words that describe him: eternal, creator, divine. We saw that in John 1, verses 1 through 3. And he's also described Jesus on earth for us, his humanity, what he brings to us: life, light, grace, and truth. The truth that he is our Redeemer. John is describing Jesus to us in an amazing way. And what John is wanting, he's wanting us to know Jesus the way he knew him. He's wanting us to have that type of connection, that type of relationship, that type of friendship. He wants to provide other people the opportunity that he had. John didn't take for granted all of the time he had with Jesus. He didn't take for granted everything that he was able to see, all the miracles he was able to witness. He didn't take for granted all of the lessons that he heard Jesus teach. So many times after Jesus would teach, especially in parables, the apostles, they would talk with Jesus after the fact, and they would want further clarification. Jesus, tell us what this means. John didn't take that for granted. He knew the importance of Jesus. He knew what he meant to his life, what he brought to his life, and he wanted others to know about him too. And so John the apostle, just like Peter, just like the other 12, that they were pointing people to Jesus. In this next section of his gospel, we learn about another man named John the Baptist, who shared a similar message. So John the apostle is going to write about John the Baptizer here in this section of chapter 1. Let's listen to what he says. This is the testimony of John, being John the Baptizer. When the Jews sent to him priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, "Who are you?" And he confessed and did not deny, but confessed, "I am not the Christ." They asked him, "What then? Are you Elijah?" And he said, I am not. Are you the prophet? And he answered, no. Then they said to him, who are you? So that we may give an answer to those who sent us. What do you say about yourself? He said, I am a voice of one crying in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord, as Isaiah the prophet said. Now they had been sent from the Pharisees. They asked him and said to him, why then are you baptizing, if you are not the Christ, nor Elijah, nor the prophet? John answered them, saying, I baptize in water, but among you stands one whom you do not know. It is he who comes after me, the thong of whose sandal I am not worthy to untie. These things took place in Bethany, beyond the Jordan, where John was baptizing. There's been a lot of great preachers that you've had the opportunity to hear through the years. You can think about them in your mind. There's a lot of great preachers in the Bible that stand out to us. Noah, Moses, Peter, Paul. John the Baptizer needs to be on that list. And the reason John the Baptist needs to be on this list is because of who he preached. As it was with Paul, as it was with Peter, even Moses was pointing to Christ long before Jesus left heaven and came to earth. And if we were to consider the greatest preacher who's ever lived, there's one answer, and only one answer: is Jesus Christ. And all of these other individuals, they stand out to us as great preachers because they were pointing to Jesus. It's what John the Baptist did. All of us want to devote our lives to something that matters. I think everybody wants to be a part of something that's meaningful. We want to be known for something that matters, that makes a difference. And there's a question that people wrestle with in their lives at different points in time. Who am I? What should I be doing with my life? What's my purpose? The priests and the Levites, they were sent by the Pharisees to question John the Baptizer. And that's the question they start with. That's what they want to know. So they come up to John the Baptist and they say to him, who are you? And when they asked John who he was, he didn't talk about his fame. He didn't talk about his following, because he had a lot of people following after him at this point in his ministry. He didn't talk about his power. He didn't talk about all of the people that he had baptized. He simply said, I'm just a voice pointing to someone greater. In a world that's obsessed with self-promotion, John's humility, it stands out. He knew who he wasn't. He knew who he was. And most importantly, he knew Jesus. So I want to explore these lessons that we learn from John's life in ministry. John knew who he was not. The religious leaders, they were confused by John's influence. They were confused by what was happening, what they were hearing, what they were seeing. Crowds were flocking to him. John was preaching boldly. He baptized many people. And naturally, they start to wonder, is this the Messiah? Now, they had been anticipating the Messiah for years, for decades, for centuries, and they hear about John's ministry, everything that's happening. You have to try to enter the first century Jewish world. You have to try to enter their mindset, what they were thinking, what was going on. They were living in anticipation of the coming Messiah. And so that's where they start. They're asking John, who are you? Are you the Christ? But John was clear. I'm not the Christ. Oh, he was willing to confess. He was willing to talk about Jesus, but he wanted to make it clear, I am not the Messiah. I am not the Christ. And so he tells them, I'm not. Well, then they ask him, are you Elijah? He came in a manner similar to Elijah, but he was not Elijah. Are you the prophet? Think about Moses way back in Deuteronomy, talking about somebody who was coming after him, who was going to be greater than him. They wanted to know if he was the one Moses was talking about. Are you the Christ? No, I'm not. Are you Elijah? I'm not. Are you the prophet? No. John always deflected attention away from himself. He could have accepted the fame. He could have taken the glory. But instead, he deflected attention away from himself to point to Jesus. John was like the moon. The moon has no light of its own. It only reflects the light of the sun. That's what John did. He reflected the light of Christ. As we live our life, even as we're involved in ministry, true ministry is not about making our name great. If you notice, when I put up the list of great preachers, they were all preachers from the Bible. There's a lot of people in today's time as preachers that want to bring attention to themselves. They're concerned about their social media following. They're concerned about how many people are looking at their podcasts, concerned about all of these things that are superficial, that don't matter. What matters is Jesus. What matters is sharing the greatness of Jesus' name. In your workplace, in your school, in your family, people may notice your kindness, your integrity, your patience, your peace. I'll even take it a step further. If you are following Jesus actively, if you've made it your mission, this is my mission, this is my mindset. Today, as I go out into the world, I am going to live like Jesus. That should be our thinking. That should be what drives us, what motivates us. Today, I'm going to follow Christ. Today, I'm going to live like Christ. If you do that, I promise you, without a doubt, I can guarantee you, if you do that day in and day out, people will notice, right? If you live like Jesus, if you love like Jesus, if you're merciful like Jesus, if you're kind like Jesus, if you're patient like Jesus, if you serve others like Jesus, if you live like Jesus in the world we live in today, people will notice. We live in a dark world. Light, it's easy to see. When you do this, people will probably ask you, what makes you different? Why are you different than what I see everywhere else? That's your chance to point to Christ. That's what we live for. That's what we want, for people to look at our life, to look at our actions, and associate us with Jesus. Now, I want you to consider this question. I think it's a big question. I believe it's an important question. What has Jesus meant to your life? You don't have to be a preacher to tell others about Jesus. I believe if we think about this question a little more, we're going to be ready. We're going to be looking for opportunities to share the answer to this question with our friends, with our neighbors, with our coworkers. Maybe we don't tell other people about Jesus enough because we haven't thought about this question enough. So think about this question. In your life, what has Jesus meant to you? Can you put it into words? Can you think about your life, what it was before Jesus, what it looks like now? Can you try to capture what Jesus has made possible for you? Where would you be without Jesus? I mentioned in the beginning, John, the apostle, writing this gospel from the vantage point of a best friend. if you think about the people that are really close to you in life, the people that have made a difference in your life, that have invested their time and effort and energy into you, it's difficult to think about our lives without these people. It's impossible for me to think about my life without my parents, without my wife, without some of the Christian friends that I have, because I know what they've brought into my existence. Think about this with Jesus, because there is nobody who's brought into my life what Jesus has brought. And as you live and as you have opportunities to tell people about Jesus, just tell them this. Just answer this question. Just let them know what Jesus means to you, what he's made possible to you. It may be the opening icebreaker is simply this. Tell me what you think about Jesus. And they'll give you an answer. It may be, I don't believe in him. It may be, I'm not sure. It may be a myriad of different things. But more than likely, if you're talking with somebody and you ask them that question, what do you think about Jesus? It's likely they'll volley it back to you. What do you think about Jesus? There's your opening. Just tell them what Jesus has meant to your life. John, he knew who he wasn't. He knew he wasn't the Christ. He knew he wasn't Elijah. He knew he wasn't the prophet. But he did know who he was. He had a purpose. He was here for a reason, and it was an important reason. And he makes it clear as the priests and the Levites sent by the Pharisees continue to question him. He lets them know who he is. I am a voice. I am preparing people for Jesus. He understood his role. He understood his place. He knew what his mission was. What a blessing in life to have a purpose, to have a mission. That was John. He wasn't the light. Jesus was the light. He was the voice. His calling was to prepare hearts for Jesus' arrival. In the ancient world, when a king was coming to visit a particular place, maybe a village, maybe a town, workers would go ahead to clear the roads. They would remove stones. They would level paths. They would fill potholes. They would make it as smooth as possible. They were preparing the way for the coming king. John's mission was spiritual road work, preparing hearts for the king. Before a concert, there's always a sound check. The musicians, they tune their instruments. They adjust the microphones. They get ready for the main event. John was the sound check for Jesus. He made sure hearts were ready before the main act arrived, the Savior himself. That's what John did. So here's a question that the priests and the Levites wanted to know the answer to. Here's a question that the Pharisees wanted to know. Who are you? You have this following, you're baptizing all of these people. We're hearing about your work. People are flocking to you. Who are you? Notice what he didn't say. There's a lot of things he could have said, but he didn't. He did not say, I am the son of Zacharias. You think about that story. What a story. That was an opportunity to share that, and that's not the story he wanted to share. I'm the son of Elizabeth. Another great story. The faithfulness of this woman. That's not the story you wanted to share. I'm the cousin of Jesus. Oh, wow, that would be great. That would be a great icebreaker. That would be a great way to describe yourself. That's not the story he wanted to share. I'm the son of a preacher. Nope. I am a prophet. This is how he answered. I am a voice. Seems like a strange answer, doesn't it? If somebody came up to you and you were talking to them, they weren't sure who you were, and they asked you this question, who are you? And you answered, I am a voice. They'd probably think you're crazy. What? People would look at us with confusion if we answered this question in that way. But you know what? It's exactly who we are. It's exactly what we are. It's our calling, our purpose. We are voices pointing others to Jesus. Which brings us here to this final point. John knew who Jesus was. John knew who he wasn't. I'm not the Christ. I'm not Elijah. I'm not the prophet. But he knew who he was. I am a voice pointing others to Jesus. I'm a voice preparing the way for the coming Messiah. And then we get to this. John knew Jesus. This is the most important knowledge any person can possess. If you consider all of the stories that John could have told about himself, he could have told the story about Zacharias, his father. He could have told the story about Elizabeth, his mother. He could have told the story about being the cousin of Jesus. He could have told the story about coming in the likeness of Elijah. That's not what he was interested in. And as we're talking to people, we tell a lot of stories. Some people are great storytellers. They can just mesmerize you by their stories. And people will wave these intricate stories. We tell stories about our life. We tell stories about our background. We tell stories about our passions, about our hobbies. Let's tell the story that matters. There's one story that matters above everything else. It's the story of Jesus. But to tell that story, you have to know who Jesus is. This is the most important knowledge any person can have. John recognized the greatness of Jesus in the smallness of himself. In this culture, only a slave could untie someone's sandals. Yet John said, I'm not even worthy to do that. Only a slave would stoop down, would kneel down and untie their master's sandals. But John said, I can't even do that. I'm not even good enough to do that. I'm not even worthy to do that. That's humility. That's reverence. John stood in the presence of God, and he knew it. Do you remember that story in Luke where Peter comes face to face with the Messiah? It was out on a fishing boat, and all of a sudden, Peter was collecting fish like he never had before. And you remember what he said to Jesus? Get away from me, for I am a sinful man. He came face to face with the reality of who Jesus was. This is the Messiah. John, he stood in the presence of God and he knew it. We could say that about John the Apostle. We can certainly say that about John the Baptizer here because he says it. I'm not even worthy to untie his sandal. He knew the greatness of Jesus. And if you know who Jesus is, you're going to be humble. You're going to be reverent. You're going to bow before him. You're going to follow him. You're going to do what he says. Later in John's ministry, he said this about Jesus. This is John the Baptizer talking about Jesus, and I love this thought. He must increase, but I must decrease. It's a great pattern to follow. It's a great way for us to live our life. And you look at John the Baptizer's message, it's still relevant today. Thousands of years later, I'm standing up in front of you talking to you about this voice who pointed other people to Jesus. The voice of John, it still resonates. He denied himself so that Christ could be exalted. He defined himself by his mission, not by his personal popularity. He devoted himself to magnifying Jesus. In a world full of noise, God still needs voices to point people to His Son. In your words, speak about Jesus when opportunities arise. I just shared some opportunities we have coming up here at Westside. Within the next month, several opportunities for us to engage with people. In your words, speak about Jesus. Share the story that matters most. In your actions, let kindness and honesty reflect Him. And in your heart, stay humble. Because it's not about my name. It's not about your name. It's about His name. The Apostle John and John the Baptizer, they knew, they understood what Jesus meant to their life. I hope all of us understand what Jesus makes possible for us. Right now, if you're struggling in your life, there's an answer. There's a solution. I like solutions. I like problems. I like solutions. Here's the solution. Here's the solution to sin. Here's the solution to being separated from God. It is Jesus Christ. If you need to be baptized into Christ, I want to give you that opportunity. Just turn away from sin. Confess the great name of Jesus the way John did. Be baptized into Christ, and all of your sins will be cleansed. If you're struggling in life, as a family, we're here for each other. We're here to help each other, support each other through the difficulties of life. If we can support you through prayer this morning, I want to give you the opportunity to come forward as we stand and sing together.